Welcome, everyone. I am Shira Epstein. I'm the Senior Director of Adult Engagement here at our amazing Central Synagogue, and it is such a joy to be here with you to kick off our Elul learning series leading into our high holidays. And it is an amazing treat to have Rabbi Lisa Rubin here with us as our first session. And we will be focusing in this session on preparing ourselves for forgiveness. Without further ado, I hand it to you.
Thank you. Shira has been the most wonderful addition to our adult engagement team. She's now in her second year here, although I feel still has the enthusiasm of a newbie, which is very, very nice, and we appreciate that. I don't usually get to teach Jews. Can you imagine? I have been a rabbi at Central Synagogue going on 16 years, and I usually don't teach Jews because I direct the Center for Exploring Judaism, those who don't know about Judaism who come in to explore our tradition. And so that's a treat. This is a treat. I was so happy to be invited by the adult engagement team that I sit on to come and teach. And I was given the topic, which I'm thrilled about, of forgiveness, but I'm not going to get there yet. I will get there because I want to be invited back, but I'm not going to get there yet. I'm going to start a little bit more broadly with the high holiday period and where Elul falls on that period and what is the work that we are supposed to be doing during Elul. So stick with me here. We're going to take number one. When we say the high holidays, what period of time do we mean? Why can't you get anyone on the phone from Central Synagogue in September and October? I'm about to put it here on the board. When we think of the high holiday timeline, it's very important that we think of all the events and pit stops as part of an interconnected period of time. Nothing about the high holiday period exists in a vacuum. Everything is interconnected, and there's a beautiful playfulness of the themes of the holidays for which this month of Elul allows us to explore and kick off. The very first thing on the holiday timeline is not actually part of the holidays. So disregard everything I just said. The month of Elul precedes the high holiday period. This is our month of preparatory work. The idea being that we're going to play in the holidays like we practiced before. So because we have so much heavy spiritual lifting to do in the coming weeks and months ahead, we need time to prepare. The next thing on the high holiday timeline is an event. So let's say one would be Elul, two would be a specific event called Slichot. When does Slichot occur? Always the Saturday evening before Rosh Hashanah, except if Rosh Hashanah is on a Sunday. Because then Saturday evening is Erev Rosh Hashanah, right? So we back it up a week. But absolutely, the Saturday before Rosh Hashanah, Slichot, special service. Then we have RH, Rosh Hashanah, our new year. What are the days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur called? The 10 days, oh, they're very sweet, right? They're very, very sweet. The 10 days of awe or penitence, right? So here we have a 10-day period, days of awe or days of penitence. In every 10-day period, there comes the holiday of Shabbat. Every 10-day period, we have one Shabbat. Now, the Shabbat in the high holiday period is thematically named. What is the name of the special Shabbat between the holidays? I hear you whispering it. No. No. Shabbat Tshuva, excellent in the back. Shabbat Tshuva, the Shabbat of return. We're going to come back to the themes in a minute. Teshuvah, right? Not great for handwriting, but Shabbat Tshuva before we get to our Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. Yes?
So does that mean that every 7 years we have 2 Shabbats?
that every 7 years we would have 2. No, I love your thinking. But because the way the calendar is adjusted in Judaism, remember, Judaism is on the lunar calendar, not the Gregorian solar calendar. If we did not adjust it, all sorts of ridiculous things would happen, including 2 Shabbats during the holidays, Passover would end up in the winter, Hanukkah would be a spring, everything would get pushed. So we adjust to make sure that does not happen. Excellent question. We take control of that situation, right? Yes, and we add a month. Did you have a question? Please. Marina, everyone, look, she's so amazing. You don't even see her coming in. Incredible.
Great. Well, in the 50s, being a Reform Jew, 50s, 60s, 70s maybe, there was no Elul. I seem to remember maybe there was Slichot. There was Rosh Hashanah and there was Yom Kippur, and I don't remember anything in between. Why did they sort of remove all of these things from the timeline?
The question is,
Reform Judaism.
Why did Reform Judaism in the 50s remove things like Slichot, Days of Awe, perhaps Shabbat, Tshuva? It's a wonderful question. The early reformers had a lot to compete with here on American soil. When the Reform movement was born, it was born in Europe as a part of the Enlightenment and Emancipation, the conflation of these two events that allowed Jews to be full citizens and be a part of the Enlightenment. Jews had things to add. All of the movements, Reform really at the forefront, because there were no other movements that existed before Reform. Reform was the first, and then other groups put their flag in the ground. When Reform came to American soil, they were competing with the churches that they saw all around them, with the simplicity of services, with one theme for every service, one thing that we're praying for, one minister at the front. To be uncomplicated was one of the main imperatives for Reform because they wanted to be adaptable enough to survive in this new land. So if I present to a newcomer, and you can imagine when I present to people who aren't Jewish, I don't start with all of this and say, get ready, we have all of this to do. My first career was marketing. I know what to sell first, right? And so did the Reformers. And so as the Reformers picked and chose what was going to be the most important, some of this fell by the wayside, as did a lot of things, especially in prayer. And because the high holidays focus on prayer and our relationship to God and our relationship with each other, a lot of it could be cut out. Just like the prayer books that had grown and grown and grown until the Reform movement said, wait a second, we don't have to pray for rain if there's not a drought, and we don't have to pray for fertility if there's not a problem of infertility, and on and on. It was very practical. So some things could be let go of. Now, especially Central Synagogue is back to not only all the traditions, but a 2-day Rosh Hashanah, which the early reformers got rid of as well. Excellent question. Anything else before we go on from our timeline? Yeah. Go, Marina, go.
How did German Reform Judaism get transformed by the immigration to America of the Eastern European Jews, who became an increasing part of Reform Judaism?
That is a wonderful question and a whole different lecture that I give. And stay tuned, maybe we'll have it this year. What were the key reforms that the early reformers and the Germans brought to American soil? And a lot of it has to do with our neighbor up the block, Temple Emmanuel, and the major churches in New York City. And there were a lot of influence. Nothing happened in a vacuum in America. And Jews looked around and said, look, we're Eastern Europeans and we have that intellect and we have the means. We want to look like other houses of worship. So there's actually a very long list of reforms, but it's a different lecture. Yes.
Why do we have 2 days of Rosh Hashanah?
Why do we have 2 days of Rosh Hashanah? Does anyone know this one, or you want me to take it? Yeah.
It deals with the diaspora, because they didn't know when the actual day began. So to cover their bases, they had 2 days. Same with 8 days in other.
Excellent. I'm going to paraphrase what he said. There's a lot of fences built around the Torah and around the tradition. What do I mean by that? The calendar was announced from Jerusalem via a shofar to foreign lands. If the people in the diaspora weren't sure that they heard it on the right day and they only had 24 hours to celebrate Rosh Hashanah, the rabbis were so brilliant and said, give them 48 hours. Give them 48, they'll celebrate 24 within that 48. So every 7-day holiday became 8, 1-day holidays became 2, except why couldn't Yom Kippur become a 2-day holiday? Who's fasting 48 hours, right? Not me. The 24-hour fast became 25 hours. Anytime an extra day, hour idea is added on, it's building a fence around the Torah. That means, look, the rabbis wanted people to be able to observe the mitzvot, so let's give them as much opportunity as we can. Does anyone set their watch 15 minutes fast so they're always on time? Same idea, right? Same idea. And the last 2 things on this high holiday timeline are 2 holidays that start with an S. Right after Yom Kippur, we're starting to build our Sukkah for Sukkot, and then Simchat Torah, the joy of the Torah. So now, part of Elul is getting acquainted with the themes of the holidays, of which forgiveness is one of them. But let's see where else the themes show up. Elul, what are we doing in this month? We're thinking about the themes, but we're also looking back introspectively and figuring out, how did last year go? What went right? What could have gone better? What were the misdeeds? How can we rectify them? So there is an idea that Elul is all about personal introspection and self-awareness. Now, there are many people who do this throughout the year, right? So many New Yorkers are into journaling and therapy and meditation and things that really allow us to explore our souls. Elul is a call to conscience. What happened last year and how can we be better? We are all, as a community, building on this spiritual momentum of getting back to our best selves. Well, the first thing we have to do is admit that we're not at our best selves, that there's actually room. And so Slichot brings us, after we've spent a full month, and if we were in a traditional synagogue, we would hear the shofar every single day. That wake-up call, that sort of cry to, wow, I can't ignore this. I'm in a serious month because what's coming is the most serious part of our year, and if I don't mentally prepare for that, I'm just going to come to services for the beautiful music, perhaps the wise words of the rabbi, but it can be so much more than that. And Elul is our time to really figure out what kind of holiday period we're going to have. What does slichot mean? In modern Hebrew, slicha. Slang of the firstborn. Interesting. Not in this context. In this context, it means forgiveness. Forgiveness. And one of the major themes of the holidays, and not coincidental that that's what we're going to learn about tonight, is seeking and asking for forgiveness. Now, inherent in the idea of forgiveness is the recognition that we miss the mark. As human beings, we miss the mark. We let ourselves down, we let our families down, we let our friends down. Our relationship with God can always use repair. Forgiveness, seeking forgiveness and granting forgiveness, major theme of the holidays. Rosh Hashanah, of course, we feel joy, we feel renewal. It's a whole new beginning, even though it's the 7th month of the calendar, it's a whole new beginning. Forgiveness is going to show up again during the days of penitence because we're meditating on who we owe forgiveness to and who we're hoping will come ask for our forgiveness, right? We want to put these issues to bed as well. If there is one central theme to the holidays, one central theme, it's Tshuva. Because the process of tshuva is a process of repentance and repair, and it incorporates all the other themes, because what's the first step in repairing and returning to our best selves and to God? Personal introspection. And what's the second step? Granting forgiveness, seeking forgiveness, so that we can be transformed with joy and renewal. Lastly, the last theme that I want to bring up that you can easily overlay, this is the timeline is the operating system, and now we're overlaying over that the themes as they come up. Yom Kippur gives us judgment as a theme. God is a judge, right? We're praying, write us in the book of life. And this is meaningful because it infers that God knows what we're doing, that God has a hand in human history and is keeping track and cares what we do and how we behave. And so tonight, for the rest of the evening, we're going to spend our time looking at forgiveness. Any questions about this very deeply abbreviated high holiday timeline and themes? They only gave me an hour. What am I going to do? They gave me an hour. Questions about this? Okay. I have chosen to, there's a lot of different ways to teach about themes, and in Judaism to teach about a lot of things. I have chosen to bring in texts from our tradition, from our sacred scriptures, that will bring us through different opinions, different people over different times. Yes?
It's not a question, but I just have a request. If the timeline that you set up and discussing is really interesting, because I'm not aware of all of this, even as a member, but I would love it if you could print out the timeline and those meanings of all that, of those things that follow that you just said, because that'd be useful, really useful.
Of course. If you email me, I can follow up with any of this material really
Wonderful.
easily.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that goes for anything for tonight. We're all learning together, so of course we'll follow up. When a teacher brings in Jewish texts, we're not bringing in our personal opinion, right? We are bringing in the merit from our tradition of very, very smart people who have come before us and built on conversations that start with the Hebrew Bible. So one more quick visual, and then I promise we're going to get into forgiveness. When you think about literature and any of the quotes that I brought and passages that I brought, you always want to know where those passages are from. Because as you're assessing as a reader and inserting yourself into these conversations like our tradition allows us to do, you just want to be familiar, as far as your Jewish literacy, of where these sources are from. So I'm going to give you a very easy graphic, and I've written at the bottom where they've all come from, a very easy graphic to think about Jewish literature. This is my graphic that I use in my classes. It's an inverted pyramid. Jewish literature is strikingly unique. It is different from most of world literature. We have our classics, same as Greek classics. They're far less known, but no less profound. Most world literature, things supporting literature build up to the pinnacle. In Judaism, it is reversed on its head, and our base is the Tanakh. The Tanakh is the Hebrew Bible. That is what is our base, that is the sustaining document of our people, but that's not all, because what would the rest of this pyramid be for? Every single thing that is in this ever-expanding edifice outward, mathematicians know the lines are never going to meet, so we are somewhere up here. Everything in this pyramid is a gloss, is a commentary, is an interpretation on the Tanakh. Everything. The formal things, like the oral Torah, we'll put Mishnah here. The commentary on the first level of that oral Torah, we'll put Gemara here. Every code, every commentary, every midrash, every interpretation, and on and on. So I have labeled each text that I brought to you to find on this edifice. Just know that everything in here is merited, whether it's Mishnah or whether it's us discussing it somewhere up here in the stratosphere. The Jewish tradition is just about entering the dialogue. So we'll stand on the shoulders of those who have come before us and we will think about where that literature came from. That's the Jewish textual tradition. So we move on now to forgiveness, and this is the last that I'm going to talk, and I'm going to ask all of you to help. Why is it that forgiveness is such a big part of our tradition? Why do we seek and grant forgiveness? Well, many of the biblical prophets from the book of prophets, what are the three parts of the Jewish Bible? What are the three parts? Torah, prophets, writings, exactly. And in Hebrew, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, right, Torah. So from the prophets, the second book, many of them write about God's unending forgiveness. God is willing to forgive any transgression, and the prophet Micah especially emphasizes God's unparalleled ability to forgive and show enduring compassion and love toward his people. We read again and again that we are to be holy because God is holy. Forgiveness is somehow linked to holiness. If God is forgiving, we should be forgiving. Would somebody read the first text, God's boundless forgiveness? Can someone read that aloud? Marina has the mic.
God's boundless forgiveness. Who is a God like you, forgiving iniquity and remitting transgression, not staying angry forever toward the remnant of your own people, because you love graciousness. God will take us back in love, quashing our iniquities. Prophets, Micaiah 7:18-19.
Beautiful. So we know that's from the book of prophets, the second book of the Hebrew Bible, specifically the prophet Micah. If we wanted to be like God, according to this piece of scripture, what are some of the characteristics that we'd have? Verbatim from the text, what are they? Yeah, we'd remit transgression. Absolutely. What else? Oh, that's a hard one, right? We don't stay angry forever, right? We want to be holy like God. What else? Yeah, to be gracious, right? God loves graciousness. So God is very forgiving according to these texts, but only for what? What is the unique aspect of forgiveness in Judaism? What can't God forgive? God is all forgiving except what can't God forgive? All right, it's yours. Exactly.
We can't, God forgives us, but he can't forgive us between each other as humans.
If I've sinned against another human being and I go confess to God or my rabbi, it happens all the time. I love talking to people, but I can't forgive for sins not committed against me. So too, does God not forgive for sins not committed against God? Let's read your second quote, forgiveness from appropriate parties. Somebody want to take that? Please.
Thank you. Repentance and the Day of Atonement atone only for sins between humans and God, such as the one who ate something that is forbidden or something similar. However, sins between people, such as the one who injures another or curses another or robs him, and similar sins, these can never be completely absolved until one returns to one's friend but one owes, and appeases that person. Even if one returns the money that is owed, one still must appease the other person and request forgiveness. Even if one is harmed another only through words, one must still appease that person and continue to contact that person until one is forgiven.
All right, pause right there. Pause right there. This is two different sections of the same verse. But what we have here, does someone want to sum it up for us? Sum it up, put it in modern English for us. What does it say? Yep, in the back.
You have to show up.
You got to show up.
Yes.
And not only do you have to show up, but you have to continue to show up. You have to continue to contact the person until you are forgiven. You have to continue to show up. What else? What else do we learn from that verse? Please.
It strikes me as very strange that you have to keep going to this person. Maybe you're adding insult to injury by making a pest of yourself when they don't want to forgive
Interesting.
you. I don't remember ever reading that quote before.
Interesting. Read the next paragraph for us, and let's try to dig into why that would be. It's a wonderful point. Read the next paragraph for us.
If one's neighbor refuses a committee of 3 friends to forgive him, one should bring them to implore and beg of the person wronged. If that victim still refuses, the perpetrator should bring a second, even a third committee. And if the one wronged remains obstinate, the perpetrator may leave that person alone and move on, for the sin then rests upon the one who refuses forgiveness.
Okay, a little more texture, a little more context, but I want to go back to what you said earlier. This is, by the way, the source text for our tradition. When you say you have to ask 3 times. You go to someone seeking forgiveness, they say, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. And it's taken a lot of courage for you to go. And so you muster up more courage and you go a second time. The person says, can't do it. Just can't do it. And then the third time, where does the sin transfer? To the person not granting forgiveness. But who agrees with our friend in the back? 3 times. What a nag, right? How insulting. Who agrees with that? Has a comment on that? Yeah.
It's not about agreeing with what you said, it's about understanding it, because I've been in this kind of situation. And the first time someone forgives, it's very easy for them to say the words, please forgive me. It's very easy for them to say the words without really understanding what they did wrong. The second time they ask for forgiveness and you say no, they're forced to think about, what did I do that was so wrong? And they have to think about it. So by the time they come the third time, they've thought about it, and you can forgive them on a true basis of actual repentance. Sort of like I heard a story about rabbis when someone who's not Jewish and they want to convert. They come to the door, knocks on the door, I want to convert. They say no. They come back the second time to convert, they say no. It's only when they have the stamina and true desire to convert, when they knock on the door the third time, that the rabbi accepts it and takes them in.
So that's interesting that you bring up the story, because that's actually a midrash. That's a midrash, part of our problem-solving literature that interprets, why would a convert be turned away 3 times? But actually, in the text, I know a little something about conversion. In the text, in the Talmud, it says you should go over 3 different times why it is not ideal to convert to Judaism. And from that, it was interpreted that you are to put something in their way 3 times, when in reality, it was to protect the candidate. It was to protect the candidate. You know, I mean, can you imagine? Same problems we're having today. Have you thought about anti-Semitism? Have you thought about your extended family and community? Have you thought about bringing children into the world, you know, as a Jew, whatever the 3 questions were? But the Midrashist came along and said, wait a second, there must be a better reason than that, and came up with this beautiful, maybe it's about the convert's resolve. Right? Maybe it's about the convert's resolve. Going back to the comment, maybe it's not about the person who's granting forgiveness. Maybe going back 3 times is about the person asking for forgiveness, that it helps us refine our ask. Marina.
I'm going to mention some questions and comments from the Zoom room.
Good.
So one person asked, and I think this goes to what you were just talking about, that right now we are talking about like an emphasis on verbal apologies, but what about situations where words feel insufficient? How do we incorporate action into our teshuva or our repentance? And one of the responses, one of the comments someone said, Evan writes, I think that one of the key points is that if you actually go and apologize 3 times, you can't do the same thing 3 times. You have to do something different to try to repent. And so that's perhaps one answer, but I think our Zoom person wants an answer from you too.
Get creative, right? It's back on you. Get creative. It's on the asker. And our online friend asked about action. Words are one thing, But what about action? Which would tell us, what do we think the tradition prioritizes? Shooting off a text or showing up to someone's door? And what's the more difficult? That's something I might bring up to the convert too. You've got to show up for these things. It's difficult to be Jewish. It's difficult. We're digging deep. We are digging deep. Yes.
Do you believe in the concept of an unforgivable sin, which, is above and beyond and can never be forgiven? And what if you question the sincerity of the individual who comes to you 3 times or 1,000,000 times?
It's terrific. And I have texts on this, so let's keep going. I do believe in the concept of an unforgivable sin. I do. I'm the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors. I've read The Sunflower at least 5 or 6 times, right? I've been back to the camps, everything. I do, but I'm not proud of it. I'll say that. And I wrestle with it. I do. And I brought some texts to engage with that. Bert.
But there's a premise to all of this. Oh, I'm sorry.
Please.
Premise to all of this that we should do all these things for forgiveness when God didn't practice what he preached. God had hissy fits. And he got a little upset about Sodom and Gomorrah, so he wiped it out.
Right.
He didn't like the first humans he made, so he flooded the whole planet. And Noah didn't exactly do what he wanted, and humans started again. But he's had his moments all the way through Moses, all the way through the books of Moses.
Yes.
He does not practice what he preaches.
What do you make of that? What do you make of that? To have a system completely laid out initially by God, right, or by divine inspiration, but then carried out in very different ways. What do you make of that? If the premise of Judaism, and I believe this is the premise, to be the very best human beings we can, to live the most purposeful lives we can, leave it better than we found it. Am I a better person if I follow the model that God showed me exactly? Or am I better when I follow the model as close as possible as to the one laid out? What do you make of this? I want to see if there are any new voices that want to join our conversation. Not that I don't appreciate you guys. Okay, no, you get the floor. Please.
I wonder if the concept of unforgivable sin, God seeing things as unforgivable, Sodom and Gomorrah, and wiping out the world with water, if God can forgive humans, and humans can forgive humans, but if humans are not forgiving humans and they're still hurting each other and they have no concept of what it is that's going on and it's being perpetrated for so long and God sees that it's not going to change, then maybe that's why he feels that he has to take drastic action, because forgiveness between humans and humans doesn't seem to be happening or will happen. So he wipes the slate clean and starts over.
Yeah, I mean, God resets humanity several times in the Bible. Yeah.
Isn't this all anthropomorphism, giving God human characteristics? Because we can't fathom God, so in order to try to deal with the concept, we put on God jealousy, anger, all of these human emotions, which are not applicable.
Except, I'll play devil's advocate, the biblical writer found it very applicable to help us understand a God who could forgive, a God who couldn't forgive, a destructive God, a destroyer God. We didn't come up with the anthropomorphism. Even though we don't believe it, this is how our story's written. And every word in the Bible can be mined for meaning and lessons. And so we can throw it all away and say, well, if we believe, that God can't write or come up with words that humans can understand, there's no base of that pyramid. So we're working with what we have, right? It's an excellent point, but we are working with what the biblical writer left to us. Yes.
So I had a question about the text uses the word appeases that person. And, I'm wondering what that concept is. To me, it's more than just waiting for the other person to say, I forgive you. But the text raises the possibility that there is some type of internal shift within the person who was receiving the apology. I mean, I'd even be curious, what the Hebrew word might be for appeases. I mean, we don't hear that word.
Right. You're
much.
absolutely right. I don't have the Hebrew. I didn't bring the Hebrew in front of us, but I think you're right. If someone is appeased, they're not necessarily at full peace, right? But they're appeased for the moment. And what's more interesting is that the appeasement must be done in front of a committee of 3 witnesses. So the witnesses, it says, the committee of 3 friends, to forgive him, those witnesses must be decided that the person is appeased. Otherwise, there's no walking away. We're at number 2 and number 3. Yeah.
Well, for myself, I don't really care about the apology. What I care about is the behavior. And so this idea of, just coming to say, I'm sorry I did that, is meaningless until you see what is the behavior. And maybe it is the way they come, maybe it is the way they say it, but we all know people say everyone, what's the first word they want their child to say? I'm sorry. And we all know that the child doesn't even understand it. It's just the adult imposing their view. So what you feel demands forgiveness, what I feel demands forgiveness, which I don't, is this sounds like we're in a small town, and we have the community to help us. If you're there alone without the 3 people, you have to be a very brave person, which, I don't think is I don't feel that we have a God that requires that of us. You want to be a braver person, but, if you can't be, you can't be.
Well, that's it. And you have plenty of time to work on who you do want to be and what you can be. So there's a lot here, a defining thread of these past few comments about granting forgiveness and under what conditions should we grant forgiveness. So let's look at what our tradition said. Marina.
I have 2 questions from online, both somewhat related. One was, how can we offer forgiveness to someone, or how can we apologize to someone that might no longer be here, and how can we also forgive ourselves? And the specific example was like, my parents are deceased, and in the past I wasn't as loving, and I want their forgiveness, but they're not here.
Yeah, that's so difficult. What do we do when we've lost someone, didn't have a chance to ask for forgiveness, or didn't come to the realization, right, until it was too late? What do you think? What do you think, and what do you think our tradition says? Yeah.
Sorry, thank you. I think you pay it forward. I think you take what you learn and you do something with it.
I'll just piggyback on that. In Judaism, guilt is a verb. It is supposed to push us to do something. To feel guilty is to feel that we want to rectify it, that we want to pay it forward. So I think a little guilt is healthy, but this is it's a very tough situation because the sin now belongs with the person, but we've already gone over you can't atone to just anyone, right? So maybe the relationship changes, and now the atoning is with God. Maybe the atoning is with yourself, or you move forward as a more compassionate person. Let's read some of our texts on granting forgiveness and see if any of them resonate with us. From the Mishnah Torah, from Maimonides, under granting forgiveness, it says, it's forbidden for a person to be ill-natured and unforgiving. He must be easily appeased but hard to anger. And when a sinner implores that person for pardon, he should grant him pardon wholeheartedly and soulfully. Even if one persecuted him and sinned against him exceedingly, he should not be vengeful and grudge-bearing. So this, Bert, I can see how you might hear as, well, wait a second, God's not that perfect, but look what we're, being asked to do. But in 2 texts down, actually the next text, look what Rabbi Zera does. Rabbi Zera had a complaint against a person who insulted him. So what does he do? He paces back and forth and presents himself so the person could come and apologize. Rabbi Zera made himself available so it would be easy for the other person to apologize to him. So you were saying about the courage that it takes. What if we know someone owes us an apology and has their tail between their legs and we take it on ourselves to present ourselves before them? How about that for a flip of the relationship? Who benefits from forgiveness? Who is it that benefits? Why should we be so quick to forgive and so difficult to anger? What does our tradition know? What is it known for thousands of years that modern psychologists confirm? Who benefits from forgiveness? We do. Whether we are granting forgiveness or asking for forgiveness, because either way, you are not carrying that burden into the new year. It is recognized in our tradition that anger and guilt and hostility, what does that do to our insides? Right? Not healthy. Now here's one. You should have beat me to it and asked this question. What if someone owes you an apology but never comes for it? Never puts themselves out there, right? I'd like to apologize, but they're not coming. Or vice versa, right? I want to grant forgiveness. What happens? What happens if you hold on to that anger and you don't go seek forgiveness? You can't find the person's not available. You've heard the expression, you're carrying a hot poker around, but you're never throwing it. All you're doing is hurting your hand. It's you who's hurt, right? Not the person you're aiming the hot poker at. It clears your slate to let go of these things. I'm not saying it's easy. The tradition recognizes that it's not easy. Someone had a question. Here.
Yeah.
Arden.
I was thinking about it, but I'll just go ahead and say it. But one thing I have found in my experience is when I can't forgive someone, whether it's because they don't present themselves in a way that works for me, or because I'm holding on to something. I like to think of it as like a cycle of anger comparable to a mourning cycle. There's a time for me feeling those emotions and being honest with them, but in the end, I have to move towards a path where I end up letting go of it. But it's at my own time, it's at a certain pace, at a certain cycle.
You set the rules, right? You set the rules because all anger has cycles. That's a beautiful way to think about it. And grief has cycles, right? It's not only anger, somebody wrongs us, it's sometimes grief and betrayal and resentment and all of these emotions. The rabbis aren't saying we didn't have them, our ancestors didn't have them. They're giving guides on how we deal with them and what's best for us. And if someone doesn't come to apologize, what the tradition is suggesting is you forgive them anyway, because it's better for you. And you've heard the verse in Leviticus, you don't put a stumbling block before the blind. And I have a lot of conversations with people before the holidays when they say, she'll never, ever apologize. She'll never apologize. And I try to reframe and say, people are limited. If you keep expecting her to get over her limitations magically, you're putting the stumbling block there. It's your mindset that needs to change, says our tradition, says the rabbis. They turn it on its head so that you can benefit the most. Yeah.
Thank you. I wonder if there is another whole layer to forgiveness that we also might need to consider, and you would best be able to manage this one. If God has made it important and written it in all the text that the Jewish people need to learn how to forgive, then I wonder if it's because in making God human, God knows how we were going to get pushed around by everybody else on earth, whether we were dispossessed of our homes, of any land, of education, of everything, and shoved around and and the anti-Semitism, everything that we would have to endure. Maybe the only way to get through it is if you know how to forgive, then you can forgive your transgressions, because if you can't forgive, you're stuck and you can't move on. Just like you said, if someone can't forgive someone, they're stuck in their own anger and they can't move on. And didn't want that for the Jewish people if we're chosen. So we have to learn forgiveness as a people so that we will be able to move on when people transgress upon us, no matter who it is.
I like that. I think that's beautiful. Does that resonate with anyone? That God knew the 30 centuries of dark history that we would endure and gave us the power of forgiveness, especially against, generations past. What do you make of that? Yes, no? No. We got a no in the front. We got a new. Hi. Great to see you.
Me too. Forgiveness doesn't mean forget, correct? Right? I'm just clarifying. That's what I'm, right? So I think you don't have to forget, but you can try to move on and forgive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Please.
What about the fact that the insult is in the mind of the beholder? If the person doesn't believe that they sinned and did something, then why should they want to forgive? And I have another question. What is God's opinion about apostasy? Is that a sin that can be forgiven? Because half of the kings of Israel worshiped Baal, and Manasseh of the southern kingdom incorporated the Assyrian gods into Benjamin, Judah and Benjamin. So what did God think about that, and how would they appease that sin of the Jews?
So I'm reading the same text you are. I just want to point that out. So I have the answers that you do, which is in ancient times, people who were not of royal descent were excommunicated for apostasy. They were excommunicated. That was it. They were, look, not even in ancient times. Look at Spinoza, right? Thrown right out. The kings worship pagan gods. Absolutely, and Solomon intermarried with how many, people? I don't have the mind of God. I don't know. God forgave them, but they certainly lost their thrones and their monarchies when things got bad enough. I will say that from, Jewish history. Yes, that's absolutely. It's a wonderful question. It's an impossible question to answer because it's the same as today. The political systems and the polity of ancient Israel was out of the hands of God. It was in the hands of the monarchy, similar to today. Look at politics versus religion. These are two separate things. There are two separate things, and people usually swear allegiance to, it's a social contract theory of John Locke. They swear allegiance to the people that give them the better life and the safer life. And there's been a lot written about this lately. Why did people vote the way they voted? This is not about, allegiance to someone. Look how much was forgiven of the president that we have now that past presidents never would have been forgiven for. So you can't answer for a populace, right? Unless you understand, it's not in a vacuum, unless you understand all that's going on. What was your first question? I forgot already. I'll come back to you. Okay. And the sin being in the eye of the beholder. Well, this is great. Who watches U.S. Open tennis? What happened with the Taylor-Townsend match, right? She wins, and her opponent nitpicks about something that's not even a rule in tennis. I'm giving you a superficial example to get us out of that very deep theological hole that our friend put us in. Taylor-Townsend was insulted by her opponent because the opponent said, Taylor went to shake hands after a good win, and the opponent was very nasty, wouldn't look her in the eyes, and said, "You didn't apologize for a ball that hits a net." So those that don't know tennis, if you win a point where the ball has inadvertently hit the net, it's nice, but a little silly to say, "Oh, sorry," right? That wasn't a great shot, but I still won. Who cares? They won the shot. I've always thought that it was so silly. So this opponent brings something up from the middle of the match. "You didn't apologize." And Taylor says, "For what?" She said, "For the ball hitting the net." And Taylor says, "That's not even a rule. I don't have to apologize to you." That's exactly what happened. And the woman went on to say, "You're uneducated, you're classless, you're this, you're that." It's all over the internet the next day. The insult was in the eye of the beholder, and Taylor wasn't having it. Right? Amen. I mean, this is it. You can't, on one hand, you're not going to apologize for something you don't feel like you did. However, in families, what if, and this is not a rare, what if that goes on and on and on and festers, right? And every year we can't be together on Thanksgiving because she didn't compliment my potatoes last year. I'm not inviting her back. Next thing you know, I've got two sisters in my office. We're not speaking to each other because one is insulted and the other says you have no right to be offended. What's the best thing there? I mean, I'm asking, if people came to you with that scenario, she never compliments anything, she doesn't appreciate anything. The sister says, "You invited me, why do I have to glaze everything in your eye? You invited me to come be, for family, why do I have to say your script to you?" What would you say? How would you mediate that?
The path of least resistance is apologize even though you don't feel you should.
Boom. I says, the apologize going to kill you?
Is that hypocrisy? Is that a sin on your
No, I don't think it's hypocrisy at all. I think it's, standing on principle. One is very upset. You've got a candle flame. You can't light someone else's flame. It doesn't take away from you. So you inadvertently hurt someone. Let's make it right. Let's make it right. You don't want to be in my office. I am very straightforward, and this is what we're going to do, and we're going to, get out of here in 30 minutes and not, be reft. Let's get back to, we probably have time for maybe 2 more texts. We did who benefits from forgiveness. So let's go about the power of forgiving, or the limits. Let's end with the limits of forgiveness, bottom of your page. It was taught in a Baraita that Rabbi Yosei Bar Yehuda says, when a person commits a transgression, the first time he can be forgiven. A second time, he's forgiven. A third time, he's forgiven. But a fourth time, this is under the limits of forgiveness. That's the headline. Bottom of the page. Limits of... You don't have the limits of forgiveness. Okay. Ethics. Okay. Let me read it to you. It was taught in a Baraita. When a person commits a transgression the first time, he's forgiven. A second time, he's forgiven. A third time, he's forgiven. But the fourth time, no, not forgiven. As it is stated, thus said God, for 3 transgressions of Israel, okay, but for 4, I will not forgive. All these things does God do twice or 3 times with a man. How much more between 2 men? So whoever earlier said this is about behavior, this is not about words, Maimonides thought that the true sign of whether someone has changed and transformed is if they're presented with the same scenario the next time and acts differently. So you can say to someone, I forgive you for the past, but I'm a little hesitant, it's happened so many times. If it happens again, I don't think we can be in relationship, right? That's perfectly sanctified by the tradition. Perfectly sanctified. Let me see, the last text that you have, and I apologize, is can we refuse forgiveness? Why don't you read this one because you brought this up? You read this one. Can we refuse forgiveness?
The answer is yes. I have to read it anyway? If the offender never admits wrongdoing, then even if he or she has served a prison term, the very first step in return has not been achieved and no forgiveness can legitimately be demanded of the victims. Although gross offenses should probably not be forgiven without sincere attempts to engage in the process of return, one might be prone to forgive more minor offenses without such a process, both as a pragmatic way of getting on with one's life and possibly of restoring a friendship, and also as an expression of the religious demand that we imitate God. Such free forgiveness, though, becomes harder to justify as the offense grows larger. Then God's righteousness seems to be the divine attribute that we should emulate.
Beautiful. You know, we have these opinions of, yes, you know, there are things that we don't forgive, and we this and we that. The important thing is, as Jews, we remember that our opinions are shaped by our tradition, right? Again, if I'm in a debate, if I'm teaching, I'm not teaching my personal opinion. I am teaching what our tradition has taught for centuries before. That's how the Jewish mind works. So we have all these scholars up here because the evolution of thought has been passed to us, and this is where we get our ideas from. Yes?
And we do have a legal system. So if the sin is against us or one of us, and it can't be resolved, then there's something more than this individual forgiveness that we're talking about at this holiday time. And there is, you know, when you fear what someone's going to do with their anger towards you, it makes a difference. And sometimes it's much bigger. You know, we think we're so important. You know, maybe not. The community is important, and that's why we have the legal system, which hopefully protects the whole community.
And that's really, you know, highlights why the Jewish legal system, alongside the civil system, is so important. I mean, we have the most organized system of legislated good acts known to mankind. That's the Jewish legal system. And we may not always understand the black letter law of every single thing that went on in ancient Israel, but we can extrapolate the themes that relate to us today. We don't live like in Israel according to religious law, but as Jews and a Jewish community, we live by these religious ideas. That's why you came tonight, to learn about forgiveness. That's why hopefully you'll show up for the high holidays to go through this process. And our rabbis and our traditions say that process and those themes that I had on the board earlier are so important that even if you go through the entire year never thinking of them, this is built into the year. Not just for religious Jews, for all Jews. It is a built-in system of entering the new year, of demarcating time, of not allowing time to be monotonous, of not allowing us to carry forward the parts of ourselves that showed their head the prior year. It's our time to be reborn, and forgiveness is one of the main doorways into that rebirth. Thank you so very much. This was wonderful to be with you. And I hope you'll join my colleagues, Rabbi Andrew Mandel, Kaplan Mandel, and Rabbi Sarah Berman for our second 2 installments of the Elul series. And of course, I hope to see you at the holidays. Be well.